People of the internet! This next video I want to get into comes from Anton, of course. Going 50-50. Of course, this is another narrative that I hear a lot, of course, on these social media streets. One that I'm actually very tired of because, again, folks, as I always say, it should always come down to your personal preference. But let's get into this topic. It looks like he's reviewing a clip from a woman who says going 50-50 while making well over six figures. Well, you know, six figures high, I guess moderately high six figures. Woman goes 50-50 with her husband. They make $268,000 a year in DC. Shout out to DC. I just saw that last part there. Near DC. So of course they must be in that DMV area, which is where I'm originally from. Let's go ahead and see what the topic of conversation is on this video. Again, talk about going 50-50 with your partner.
But it's a woman or a couple.
Let me pause right there. I already see Bethesda, Maryland. I already know. I know exactly where Bethesda, Maryland is. Shout out to the DMV. Shout out to Silver Spring, Maryland. Shout out to Montgomery County. Looks like this lady resides, her and her husband reside in Bethesda, Maryland. If you know, you know. Bethesda, Maryland is a pretty affluent area in Maryland, where you better be making some decent money. Again, you see it in the thumbnail here, $268,000 a year living in Bethesda, Maryland. Again, a pretty affluent area. Let's see what is the debacle here. Living on $268,000 near Washington, D.C. Let's see what the gripe is here.
I don't know if I ever feel that I will make it, right? Because once you feel you achieve something, you get settled and then life becomes boring. So I always like to get better and better and achieve for the best. My name is Cristina Telotrillo. I'm 38 years old. I live in Bethesda, Maryland, in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I live with my husband, Sebastian, and my 5-year-old son, Leo. And in 2023, my husband and I made about $216.
Pause there real quick. Bethesda, Maryland is not the suburbs of DC. Maryland is Maryland, DC is DC. Yes, I'm gonna be technical on that. You know, if you're from the DMV area, then you pretty much understand. She says she lives in Bethesda, Maryland, in the suburbs of Washington, DC. No, Washington, DC has its own suburbs, if I'm not mistaken. Being from Silver Spring, Maryland myself, Bethesda, Maryland is Bethesda, Maryland. Bethesda, Maryland is not the suburbs of Washington, DC. But I get it. I get it. Let's get it back into it. Of course, you saw it there. You saw her and her husband.
In 2023, my husband and I made about $200.
All right, so you see it there. This couple lives on $268,000 a year near Washington, D.C. Bethesda, Maryland, yes, is, I guess, somewhat near D.C., but it's not the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Nonetheless, let's get into it. Again, some would argue pretty decent money, right? Again, I did mention that Bethesda, Maryland is a pretty affluent area. Bethesda, Chevy Chase, if you know, you know. If you're from that area, of course, you're gonna know that's pretty, yeah. So 268. I want to see if she's complaining about that. Is she living above her means, below her means? Of course, I'm familiar with this Make It segment from NBC. I've watched a couple of these videos from their channel over on NBC, of people just kind of sharing, you know, a little bit of personal information in terms of their lives, what they do for a living, how much they make, how much they budget, things of that nature. That's usually the context of these videos. So I want to see if she's complaining that her and her husband are still maybe struggling. Let's get some more context from this couple.
A lot of money. It's a lot of money. Let's see how they spending it. Senior economist at the U.S. Census Bureau, and her husband is an economist at an international financial institution. So they're both equally yoked. They both about that bag. They both are economists, which means that it's probably a good way for them to manage their money. And she teaches as a professional.
In 2023, my personal income was $162,000 for working at the U.S. Census Bureau and teaching at the University of Maryland.
And they also made $6,000 from a rental property that they own in D.C. If she made $160,000, you must make $108,000. Christina purchased 3 additional rental properties by herself.
Wow. Yeah, she's shout out to her. Christina says she's 38 years old. Shout out to her, man. Rental properties, of course, I always hear real estate is a way to gain some wealth. Looks like her and her husband are doing pretty well for themselves, career-wise, but I'm glad to see she has other means herself in terms of real estate property, this, that, and the other. Of course, that's going to be how you can beat the rat race, as they say, man, or just be able to survive out here, you definitely need more than one hustle. And of course, that's what I'm trying to embark on. I'm not even there myself yet, to be completely honest, in terms of having multiple profitable streams of income. But it is a goal for sure. So shout out to them, doing pretty well for themselves. Let's continue.
Me and my husband split expenses like 50-50. We've been doing that since we got married 7 years ago. My parents were very...
Pause right there. So you hear it there. Let's put this to rest. They've been married for 7 years. They split everything 50-50. When did we stray away from that? What is wrong with that? Now, we'll say this, though. And again, they both make equal amount of money. I get it. I think I'm not necessarily, me personally, like, I, as a man, me personally, again, and this is what I always say, man, like, it should come down to your personal preference. I do want to be a man that could be able to go full 100%. Like, I do want to be the provider. It had nothing to do with my ego or trying to, you know, be over masculine, whatever the case is. I want to hopefully, God willing, be in a position where I can front the greater majority of the household expenses. But in our current world, our current economy right now, for a lot of households, that's not realistic. So going 50-50 is the next solid alternative, which does make sense. I just don't understand how people shun the idea like, oh, no, I ain't going 50-50 with no man. You'll hear women say, oh, no, I ain't going 50-50 with no man. I ain't doing that. Why? And again, I don't know if it's a cultural thing. I don't know if it's a preference thing, whatever. Of course, it's going to be a preference thing, but that is a narrative I usually hear a lot within the African-American community. Nah, I don't want to go 50-50 with my man. Why? I'm doing all this. I'm doing all that. Nah, he need to pay my bills. Nobody wants to work anymore. And excuse my, I guess my impersonation. That's supposed to be a person. Nah, in all seriousness, man, I don't understand why people don't champion the idea. I think the average household, of course, let's keep it real. I think the average household, minus this social media culture, I think everybody does choose to go 50-50, right? It just makes sense. It's more cost effective. It's more realistic, of course, in the current times that we're living in now, in this current world. There's nothing wrong with going 50-50, folks. Again, you can have your personal preference. Again, I do aspire to be a man who's making enough money where he can front the heavier bulk of the expenses in the household. But let's say, for example, I'm on the come up and I'm entertaining a woman who's also on the come up and maybe she's trying to establish herself, then I don't see why both parties can't, even if it's maybe 60-40, 70-30. Whereas, all right, cool, I'm going to focus on majority of this. You can maybe cover that. Cool. But to say that nobody should be going 50-50 and every man needs to be the breadwinner of his family, I think that's backwards. Let's watch a little bit more. I like the breakdown here of their expenses. Those are high numbers, man. In July alone, they spent a little bit over $14,000. You see how much they spent on food, insurance, this, that, and the other. And I did a video as well, too, man. This is the cost of living is getting hard out here. I did a video not too long ago talking about the middle class. I think that actually came from Anton as well, too. Talking about the elimination of the middle class, right? And how people believe the middle class is gone. You can check that video out. I basically said that I think it's the lower class that's gone. I think what we now know as the lower class is what will become the middle class. So I think there's always going to be upper class people that are fairly affluent, making six figures, well over six figures and above. And I think what we now know as the middle class will now be the new lower class, right? So I think there's just going to be an upper class and a lower class. The middle class will fall to the lower class will get eliminated, is my personal opinion. So kind of just seeing this breakdown here. These are heavy numbers, man. Housing and utilities, saving and investments, child care, insurance, things of that nature. All these things that are necessities, you would call, just the basic necessities of life, the cost of living. It's not cheap at all, is what I should say. So I just wanted to get the context. Of course, most of these videos I don't necessarily need to watch in its entirety. Of course, I don't want to make sure I miss out on any context. But the gist of it, of course, the video was titled "Going 50-50 with Your Partner, Making $268,000 a Year." I was more interested to see if they were saying that wasn't enough for them. Because $268,000, I don't care who you are, $268,000 a year is decent money. It's very good money. For a lot of people, it's very good money. So I was almost a little bit nervous to see if they were going to say that they are still struggling to make ends meet with $268,000 a year combined. But it looks like they have it under control, right? And I would call themselves fortunate. I would call them fortunate. But of course, we know that's not the narrative for a lot of people, folks. It is hard out here. Whether you are single, if you're a single person, whether you have kids, whatever the case is, for the most part, the average human right now is having a hard time making ends meet with the rise in inflation, everyday expenses, and the losing of jobs and the slow, job market where people are not getting callbacks from employers, whatever the case is. It's not easy out here. So if now more than ever, I think 50-50 is something we need to be embracing. And let's get rid of this culture that tries to shun people for the decisions that they're making in their own household. I think everybody's entitled to make constructive decisions for their own household based off of their own preferences. Again, I say this a million times, folks. Don't go off of these social media narratives and try to follow this celebrity lifestyle and put pressure on these men to make us feel like, oh man, we're losers if we can't, take over every single expense in the household. It's not easy out here, folks. Household, any type of relationship or in a household, it's a team effort. It's a team effort. You gotta contribute in some form or fashion. Is what I believe. It's not easy out here. So I just kind of wanted to get some context for that and put this narrative to rest that 50-50 is something that should be frowned upon. Going 50-50 with your spouse is not something that should be frowned upon. If you are of traditional beliefs and want to be the man that is the sole provider, then of course you got to work 10 times harder to do so. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, I say that's what I kind of want to do as well too. So whether you are a man right now that's able to man all the expenses in the household, cool, kudos to you, man. Shout out to you. But if you're a man that's also going 50-50 with your significant partner, your wife in the household, man, don't feel ashamed, don't feel discouraged, because it's not easy out here for anybody. So I'm pretty sure you guys are doing what's best for you and your household, and I would encourage you to continue to block out the noise from the unrealistic rhetoric on the internet. That's my thoughts, folks. I want to hear yours down in the comment section below. What are you doing in your household right now? Are you going 50-50 with your partner, and is it working? Are you a man that has found some financial success and are in control of all the financial expenses in your household? I want to hear from you down in your comment section below. If you're somebody that is pro 50-50 or have taken the traditional route, I think the traditional route has always been 50-50, if we're being completely honest. But as men, us being the archetypes that are predominantly in control of providing and protecting, most men do want to be the ones that can man the heavy accessories of the bills for their family. So I want to hear from you down in the comment section below. I want to hear your thoughts, what's working for you, and yeah, the likes, the comments, the subscribes are all greatly appreciated. Let's get into the next one.